Alright guys, let's dive back in. I went ahead and did the border all the way around, so I have all four corners of my page done in black. This just helps it, like when it's hanging on the wall, to better stand out. Gives that nice little extra push forward. So, have our border done. Now the first thing on our actual design, just like when we're tattooing, is going to be our black shading. If you're familiar with acrylic or oil painting, this is like the grisaille, the undertone. So I went ahead and I have two rinse out cups. If you can see over here, I have two rinse out cups. One is going to be my actual rinse out for the brush, and one will be nice, fresh, clean water used to do our spit shading. I mentioned before I used to do a lot of actual spit shading. I used to do it like putting the brush in your mouth and putting spit in the brush to get the blend or to suck out excess paint. But I found out a lot of this paint is actually somewhat toxic, so I don't recommend doing actual spit shading anymore. It's 2020, we now know the health side effects of doing some of the old school techniques, so we're going to be using clean, fresh water. So make sure you have two rinse out cups. One's going to be your rinsing out, and one we're only going to use for, again, just our spit shading. So giving this a nice shake, and I'm opening it away from my painting. Again, this is the Speedball Black. It's called Speedball Super Black. I would show you the label, but it's actually been destroyed by the ink itself. So I've also went ahead and swapped out our palette, our watercolor palette, for a fresh one here. I rinsed out our brushes and I have the fresh water here. So I'm going to put this off to the side. Hopefully you can still see that. And I'll bring the painting in like this. Now, I'm going to put my color brush, the brush I use for color work, off to the side here. I'm just using my two brushes. My small one here, this is a size 2 Winsor Newton Cotman brush. This is a 111 round, but it doesn't matter. Any brush like this will work. My shader brush, my spit shaders, my Grumbacher Golden Edge 4620 round. And I've had these brushes for quite a long time. I really just like these three brushes. I have stacks and stacks, but I go back to these same three for pretty much any painting I'm doing. It's going to be the same just like for your tattooing. You're going to find like a few needle sizes you really like, your go-to needle sizes. These are my go-to brush sizes, kind of the same thing. So first things first, I don't want to get too far into this. We do show you all this in the full program. I'm sure all of you guys have seen this already. So a quick rundown on, or a quick review I should say, on how to do some shading. Again, use your practice paper, get a few practice shades in before you jump to the actual thing. I'm making sure my ink is mixed up, making sure my brush is saturated, and I'm just kind of spinning off the excess. And same thing here with my shader brush. I'll make sure it's nice and broken in. Make sure all the soap and stuff was taken off in the sink. I don't want to bring any soap into my water. This is a nice, clean, freshly washed brush. But I'll just get the bristles nice and warmed up here in the water, and then I'll just dab it off my paper towel so it's not soaking wet. I'm not leaving it dripping. Let me slide this over. I'm not leaving it dripping like this. I'll just kind of like dab it off on the cup and do a couple of dabs here on my paper towel. And what we're going to do is we're pretending like we're doing a shading on our painting here. So our first big piece of shading will be that bottom part of the heart. And we're doing our solid fill here. And you want to stop a little bit shorter than where you think you're going to need to, because this black actually blends out quite far. So I'm just taking my brush at like a 45-degree angle, and I'm teasing that edge and bringing it out. And I'll even like bring off some excess here to come in and bring that off. Maybe I'll go for another rinse if I really want to soften that edge, but keeping in mind that this will be covered by our color, so I'm not making sure it's like super butter smooth. But this is going to be perfect for our purposes here. If you want to, go ahead and do a couple more. So I went back and forth a few times. If you want to, you can just put a little bit of ink here, and you can try and just do one pull. Notice it's much shorter. I didn't bring it out quite as far. And I'll tease that edge. And I turn my brush a little bit more as I blend it out like this. And you can really see how far this blends out. If you really want to blend it out, that's why I went back and rinsed it off, dabbed it on my paper towel, and picked up some of the excess ink. Now we have our dark, our mid, and our light, all with one color, or one pigment, one shade, and that is, of course, just straight black. So pretty happy with that, pretty comfortable. Again, this is just my thinking that this black is old, it's expired. And these birds are popping off today. We have the windows open in the shop, so I apologize if that's fairly distracting, but the birds seem extra happy today. I think the landscapers just came and cut the grass out back, so maybe they're chasing bugs. Irrelevant, let's get back to painting. So, same thing here. I'm going to start in, just like with our lining, I'm going to start in a few places that aren't really going to matter as much if it's not super smooth, if my shading is a bit maybe kind of choppy or something. So getting us warmed up, we warmed up on our practice paper. Now we're going to pick the least conspicuous place on our painting that we could put our shading where it's not going to make too much of a difference. So looking at this, maybe I'm looking at my design here on the computer, the same reference you guys have, and I'm looking at, I think I'm going to start in my fletching of the arrow. So knowing it's a small area, I'm really going to just take the smallest amount of ink here, making sure my brush is ready to go, and coming right up along the arrow just a little bit. Like that. Maybe I'll just soften up that edge. And you'll see what I'm doing is I'm actually like adjusting the pressure. If I really want to get some saturation, I'll push harder and make the brush more flat. That lets more, it kind of squeezes more water out, puts more water into the surface of the paper, and I can kind of manipulate the ink a bit more. But when I came back in to pick up that excess ink for my second little rinse there, I just barely kind of did the tip. The more dry your brush is, the more it'll pick up off the paper. The more wet your brush is, the more it'll activate the paper and activate the pigment on the paper. So keeping that in mind, it's kind of hard to memorize all of that, but you're going to get this through just practice and repetition. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing here. What is our next little section we're going to tackle? For me, I'm going to go ahead and jump down to this bottom part of the banner, and it's just a little shading. I'm going to go a little heavier on this one because we have more area to cover. So I'll paint that little corner there. And then I did a little second dip to kind of smooth it out, like so. And I'm not painting all the way to the edge. I always want to leave like a highlighted edge, so I don't want to bring the pigment or the stain or the wash all the way to the edge. You want to leave a little bit of a highlight there. And this isn't on the original design, but I think for me I want to do another small little bit of shading on this top part, just because in my mind that's how it would be in real life. There would be some shading coming on this back little banner. I'll put just a little bit like that. And I could have gone darker, but I'm going to do a little bit of a layering effect on the back banner just to give you some practice with actual layering. So I don't want to go super dark with my black and then have to layer color and then layer color. It might get a bit too opaque, it might get a bit muddy. So I'm going to keep it a little bit lighter, knowing that I'm coming back in to do that. Okay, now moving on to this section here. And it's going to be the same routine. There we go. Okay, so I could have gone a bit higher with the black here, but I'm going to leave it just like that because the same effect we're going to be doing with the layering of the color. So I can go a little bit darker with my primary color on this back part here to give it that kind of shading effect on the upper part of the banner, just showing you there's multiple ways to do it. Next, we're going to have underneath the banner on the heart itself. And for this one, I'm keeping in mind that obviously the light source is coming in this way, so that's why we're casting a shadow here, we're casting a shadow here. We're going to be casting a shadow underneath this banner on this side of the heart. So let's go ahead and, keeping in mind our light source, and I want to actually paint in the curve like so. And that'll work. And I will do the same thing up top. I keep checking my fingers, I keep checking the sides of my palm, because if you're working like this fairly quickly, then you have a tendency to get some of the ink or the shading on your palm. And when you put your hand down for the next section, you stain the painting and it ruins your painting and your day. So keep checking. It's going to happen. You're going to get like a brush drop. You're going to get some stain on your paper that you don't want. But just, I would encourage you to go ahead and finish the design just for the practice aspect, and knowing that if it hasn't happened to you yet, it will happen to you many, many times. So you'll see I'm dragging my brush around like the same shape, so I'm not just like bringing it straight out, I'm actually like tracing the shape. And I'm thinking in my mind, like if light's hitting this way, then it'll be coming over and casting that shadow around that corner back here. So it's kind of pushing that edge kind of away from the light source, away from the where the light's coming in. I think I'll put even just the smallest little dot here. This is optional. Just to give a little hint of a shadow on that back edge. And I think for the most part, that is all of our black shading. There's really not a whole lot to the actual black shading on this. For the most part, it's going to be manipulated by using color. And yeah, I think that's it. So I'm going to go ahead and let this dry again. I mean, it's fairly fast. Let's just say 5 or 10 minutes to let this kind of dry out. And I'll see you in a few minutes to finish up the color. Alright guys, we gave that a few minutes to dry. It could probably use a few more, so while this is still drying, we're going to go ahead and get into our colors for the painting itself. First things first is take the brush that you inked with and rinse it out in your rinse out cup and leave it really soaked with water. See, it's still dripping with water. And I'll put that off to the side. You don't want to let ink or any kind of paint or anything dry in your brush. You're going to absolutely ruin it if you do that. So don't leave it sitting in your cup like this. It ruins the bristles themselves. So just really rinse it out in your cup, leave it really soaked, and put it off to the side so we can actually wash our brushes really well at the end of this. Now, moving into our color, I'm going to grab my color brush, and remembering back to our color theory lessons, we're going to be tackling our colors just like in tattooing from darkest to lightest. So here I have some of my Doc Martens. I also have a crimson. I'm not sure. I have scarlet, daffodil yellow, and peacock blue. And we'll be mixing most of our colors from these. I don't think this is true daffodil yellow. I think this is a daffodil. It was a daffodil yellow, and I put other colors of Doc Martens in this to make my own custom mix. I do this with tattooing sometimes too. If it's the same brand and manufacturer, you're typically okay to get away with it. But it can get tricky if you over mix an entire bottle. You gotta throw the whole bottle out. I have a few of those as well that I accidentally went too far with. So when you see the color on the paper itself, notice it's not gonna be the same color if you went and bought a straight bottle of daffodil yellow. This is a custom mix, but it is still just Doc Martens concentrated watercolor. So same is true for this scarlet, I believe. But if you want to, I have a few of the pure ones. I can actually make a little color sample. I can show you what the true colors actually look like without being too diluted. And that way you know which colors you want to buy for yourself. So bringing out our trusty little practice sheet here. I'm going to look at the darkest color for me is going to be either that olive green color or that kind of brown. So let's go ahead and start with the brown. And we're going to make that by the same way we made our brown for the background here, but not so diluted. Actually, while we have this set up, I'm going to take my scarlet, and it looks pretty dark, so I'm going to paint a little section here. I'm going to let that dry while we mix our colors. That way I can see what this color will look like once it's dried. Next we have our gold and our blue. So same thing actually, while I have this here, let me clean this out. I'm just going to paint a few swatches to see what these colors actually look like when they're dried. I recommend doing the same thing. Actually, what I would do when I first got new inks is I would paint a full swatch. I would mix a few things, and I would just kind of like make little recipe cards. That way I knew at a glance, you know, if you only have 3 or 4 colors, you can do this when you first get your brand new bottles of ink, and you'll know what they look like as they're dry. You just have this reference card ready to go. This is a really dark blue. So maybe I don't want... I guess it's fine for this, but I wouldn't recommend getting this dark peacock blue if it's your only blue. I do have an icy blue and a few other blues that I would recommend getting something a little bit lighter versus trying to use this as really dark and trying to dilute it and go through all that. So it'll be fine for what we're doing here. A couple of drops in my gold, and you can see it's already pretty much turned that gold into a really, really, really dark green. Actually, it's not so bad here on the paper, but if you look inside this this well here, this ink well or this paint well, you can see it's really dark. So this is where the idea of having the practice paper comes in handy, because if I would have been like, wow, this is really dark, and then I went to paint it on my actual painting, like, oh, it's not that dark at all. That's unfortunate. It's not the same color I thought it was. So let me add a little bit more blue and see. I want it to be not super, like, I don't want like a grass green, something really bright and vibrant necessarily. I want it to be, yeah, maybe something like that. Something a little darker. We just let that dry for a few minutes, but I like that green. This red is really, really bright, so you can see these colors together, like it's gonna really stand out. I'm not gonna have a lot of like true green in this painting. It's gonna be like a green undertone. As we mentioned in the intro of this video, like the reason why he's using so much green or a tint of green in the banner is because the heart is this bright central piece. It's really, really red. It's right there in your face. So you wanna have the opposite color to kind of push it back and balance it out. Likewise, I'm only going to be using these 3 colors, of course, our primary colors, but even if I mix this green and then I want to make a brown, I would take my red that I use in the heart, the green for the banner, and mix those together to make the brown. Because if you use the same colors throughout the piece, even if it's mixed with another color, it makes the overall design feel more cohesive. Versus if I made a fresh green over here, and then I had a red, and then I had another gold, and then I had... It looks kind of too much. So try and stick with the same, like, 3 or 4 colors per piece. So what this looks like in tattooing is that I'll actually, like, if I'm mixing an orange and I have a lot of red and yellow in my piece, I'll keep those 2 reds and yellows on my tattoo station, and I'll just have like fresh caps of the same colors. And then if I want to make an orange, I'll just have my red, and I'll go into that yellow, leaving my tattoo tip a little bit dirty with the red ink and then going into my yellow to mix an orange. I wouldn't just grab a fresh color of orange from the cabinet, because doing that again keeps it more cohesive. It keeps the piece looking unified. You don't want to have too many colors going around in there. So kind of rambling on here, I'm giving this a chance to dry and kind of trying to share everything I know with you guys to hopefully help you out here. So this green isn't fully dried, but I do like where it's going. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in my piece and take a bit of a chance here. I don't want to blabber on for too long, so leaving my green loaded up. It's this really dark looking color here. And now I have my shader brush. It's freshly rinsed, so no more black ink in it. And I'm going into my cool fresh water. It's the same process with our black we're doing for our color. So we'll kind of paint our section, and then we'll come in and just kind of tease the edge and grab that edge like so, to give us a little bit of a fade like that. And again, starting where it's least conspicuous. Actually, I'm going to start up here. This almost where I started with my black, the same thing. And it can get tricky to do a green with a red. If you overdo it, it starts to feel like Christmas colors. But it's the best colors that work together, you know what I mean? Like they're the opposite colors, so they're going to complement each other in the piece and give you that powerful statement that you're looking for. So I'm going to leave that like so. And being careful to avoid like going over here and sticking my hand on that fresh paint. I'm going to come over here. And one other thing I'm doing here is when I'm mixing my brush and getting it ready to go, I'll twist it off like this. I don't want to have this super saturated to make a big mess on my painting. I don't want to reach across my painting with a lot of ink dripping off my brush and dripping onto my design, onto my watercolor paper. So it's being conscious of that, being careful of that. So while that's drying, I'm going to come down here and give this a little taste of color. Like so. And this isn't necessarily the same as the original, but I'm going to come in here and give it the same treatment on the top here. Again, this is just a painting, and even though we're modeling somebody who is like one of the godfathers of tattooing, you know, Sailor Jerry, it's important to study exactly what he's doing and why he's doing it. At the same time, don't be afraid to take some chances, you know what I mean? Like, especially if this isn't your first painting and this is your 10th, 20th, 100th painting, go ahead and start experimenting and seeing what you can kind of add to it, what you can kind of put a twist on and make it your own, you know what I mean? So even these colors will be slightly different. The design is slightly different because I hand drew it. So even though it looks like his, like there's going to be some variances in everything we do, and that's when your own voice, we say, starts to come out in the work. So I know there's everyone who's watching this video or joining us for the live program, like even if we all attempted the same exact design, the same exact thing, we had the same exact reference and the same colors, like if there's let's say there's 100 of us doing this, there's going to be 100 different versions because there's going to be subtleties in everyone's work, and that's where their own voice, their own uniqueness comes out. And as you gain more experience, just by doing, just by practice, you're going to start emphasizing that voice, and you're going to be saying like, okay, like maybe you can't even tell I looked at if I did this every day or a few times a week, then after a few months go by, I'm going to be looking at something as a reference, but you will be looking at my design versus my reference, and you won't be able to tell they came from the same place because you're simply becoming inspired by it. Like they say, once you learn the rules, you can break them, right? So right now we're learning and studying the rules of painting and what makes a good traditional painting, or traditional design for that matter. So I want to add a little bit more to this top banner here, but I'm letting this bottom one dry. I don't want to go back into it and rework it and add more moisture to it until that is fully dry. But I know my next color is going to be brown. So it's kind of like almost similar to the one we did here for the background, but it's more saturated, of course. Now that I have my green, maybe I can take some of this green and I'll just scoop some out over here. Give my brush a quick little rinse. And then I'll take some red. Let me move this guy off to the side. I'm getting a little too close. It's a pretty good brown, but maybe I want to lighten it up just a little bit. So knowing I'll have this straight, I'm gonna use this straight gold in my arrow. So I'm gonna use my straight gold, go ahead and fill up a little bit over here. And picture these being like ink caps. So I wanna have my straight gold and I wanna have my mixing gold. It's the same thing, I'm just having two caps so one stays fresh and one is able to be used. Okay, that's my brown. When they get dark like this, it becomes kind of hard to distinguish between which one is which. So this is my stronger color, this is my weaker color. I'm actually going to take my brown here, and I don't want to overdo it, but I want to mix my brown into the gold because the gold is the weaker color. I would have had to add a lot of yellow into this brown to start making a difference, as you can see here. But if I add just a little bit of brown to the gold, I'm going to save on paint. I can just put a little dot of brown into my gold, and it's going to give me the color I want versus trying to go back and forth with the other colors. So that's pretty good. However, I don't want it to be too close to my background color for obvious reasons. So maybe I'll just give it a few more drops of this deep brown. That way it's different enough. Yeah, I think that's different enough here. And now, okay, green. See, that's why. That's why you can see like most of my ink wells are stained a certain color. Like that one's stained blue, that one's stained green, that one's red, that one's yellow. I try to use the same colors for the same ink wells because even though it's stained, you'll start to see, you won't get confused. Like this is so dark, it's kind of hard to see, but because it's stained, I can kind of guess like, okay, that's my green, that's my this, that's my this. And some people go even as far as to put a little colored dot on the outside, or they'll put a little like little letter like B for blue, Y for yellow, so on and so forth. That way when these colors get so dark, it's hard to kind of tell like, oh my God, like what's what, and you don't want to grab the wrong color and go straight into your painting. So I'm going to turn this way so I know which one I'm using. Okay, that's the one, and that's my green. Got it. Cool. And now we're going to go into, I still have to come back in and do that green, but let me do that first actually. And I'll show you why in a second. And my green was this one. Yep. I turned my palette to keep myself more organized and it threw me off. Just bringing that blend out like so. All right, I'm keeping that one a little bit lighter because kind of in my mind it's kind of reaching up out into the sky, so it's going to be getting more light hitting it. And it sounds ridiculous to be talking so much about a little like 5" by 5" painting, but I'm going to explain why at the end of this, why we're actually taking the time to do this and kind of going over all the detail. But I'm sure many of you who know me already know my favorite saying, how you do anything is how you do everything. So this is a training of the senses, a training of your focus, a training of your concentration. All right. Now, while that is hanging out, I want to go back to my test paper here. Just doing a quick little blend to see how it looks, if I like it. I do, but I might have overdone that. I might try and go just a little bit darker. Reason being is I'm not going to be using this brown to its full concentrated capacity. I'll be doing a lot of blending. And when I blend this out, it looks to me like too similar to our background color. Still pretty close. I'm really going to go for it now and overpower it. All right, well, it's going to be close, but I think being in the center and being surrounded by all that red, we should still be okay. We should still get away with it. Actually, I don't want to start here because that edge is still wet, so I'm going to start down on this one here. I'm going to go for a second little touch. You can try this if you like. This is just introducing a bit more ink into, or a bit more paint, excuse me, into the already wet section. This is called wet on wet. And it's if you think it's a bit washed out, you can add a bit more pigment to it. It's kind of the opposite of adding a bit more water to something. There we go. We could still go a little bit darker with that, but I'm going to go ahead and leave well enough alone and leave that like that for now. And you'll see what I did is I left like a little bit of a highlight of the skin tone or the paper, so it's kind of like giving this natural highlight to the design versus going right up to the edge. When you go right up to the edge, it kind of makes it somewhat flatter in a lot of cases. There we go. And now I'll do the bottom section here. My brush is a bit dry. Maybe I'll leave that little kind of highlight mid-shine there in my banner as well. Yeah, I could have gone a bit darker with this banner, but we'll see how it looks after the red is in there, and we can always darken it up and do a little bit of a second pass if need be. I just want to make sure it stands out enough from the background, but I also don't want to make it too dark where it makes the lettering kind of hard to read. It's a delicate dance you do with the shading in a banner. There we go. So we'll just let that dry for a few minutes. And actually, while it's drying, we can do something relatively safe, and that is to go ahead and dive into our gold areas. These videos are becoming a bit longer than I anticipated, but again, I want to share as much as I can with you guys while I have you here. So thanks for hanging in there. Thanks for sticking with me. Hopefully you guys aren't just watching this. Hopefully you're doing it kind of with me as I'm doing it, going like the play-by-play. That's the ideal way to attack these. And now I'm going just straight into my gold color here. And I already have a little test section, so I like how it looks when it's completely dried. So no worries there. Just using the very tip of my brush. I don't want to leave like some crazy edge on it. And maybe on this one. Some colors are easier to get a nice fade or a nice blend than others. Gold is typically one of them because it's super, I don't want to say delicate, but it's like when you fade it out, it fades out quite quickly into nothing. So I want to make sure I have enough pigment here and run it up closer to the line than I would with other colors to give it that nice edge there. So that is the main colors. Now we have our red left, and we have another wash. So I'm going to show you how to do a wash to do the background here. On top of this green, we're going to do a wash of the brown. So let this dry for a few minutes. Let it make sure it's nice and dry before we try and tackle it, the next color. So give me just a few minutes, and we'll be right back. All right, artists, and we're back, and I'm going to be trying this Scarlet Red. Remember, I used it on our testing sheet, and I really like how vibrant and bright that color is. Again, keeping in mind this probably isn't just Scarlet Red. I think I mixed it with a bit of Crimson and maybe some Alpine Rose. But all that being said, I'm going to use a fresh inkwell here. And our red, for the most part, is just straight red. So making sure your painting is nice and dry. Making sure you have plenty of paint out. And making sure, not to make sure I guess, but making sure your hands aren't carrying anything you're going to put onto your painting accidentally. I've already rinsed out our brushes, but I'll do it again just for good measure. And it's just as simple as loading our brush up. And now you can see it start coming together. Making sure I feel like my head's been blocking a lot of the shot. I really hope not. Maybe I should get glasses. I feel like I have to squint and like stick my face on top of the drawing, whatever I'm working on. I unfortunately do the same thing when I'm tattooing, so maybe I should get some safety goggles or something going on. And yeah, same concept here. This brush is a bit smaller than I would like, but I really like this brush, so I'm going to make it work. Just working quickly to keep that wet edge. We don't want to have to go back and forth trying to pick it up. It's going to cause some discoloration and things in the painting itself. So I'm making sure the paper is nice and saturated, but not causing a lot of puddles. I'm going to try and turn it this way, just because I want to leave just the smallest highlight right there. Not necessary if you don't care for it. You don't have to do that on yours. At least this arrow gives us a nice way to finish off this section. And there we go. So now you know the name of the game. The name of the game is to let this dry completely. And we have one more, I'm not going to say color, but we have one more color, one more wash to put on top of this. You know, this green really stands out to me. So the whole idea behind this was to put a wash on top of this after. So letting the red really dry. And while it's doing that, I'm going to get set up for our wash. Alright, so while that's drying, let's go ahead and set up for our wash. I was going to use the brown from the banner to do this, but I don't want it to be too close to the background again. So I'm going to rinse out my brush, and I'm going to grab a bit of our brown and put it in this inkwell, this paint well, and I'm going to grab some of, wipe this down, grab some of this. So what a wash is just a really diluted version of your color. So you can see this is our full strength, our concentrated brown, and here's our wash. So now that we have that, what I'm going to do is layer it on top of that green. This is the same color this brown and this gold have been with, as I mentioned, throughout the other parts of the painting. So it's still going to give that cohesive feel, but it's going to look much different. So this is our green, and this is our blended green. So if I just take my wash and I paint it over the top of that green, you can see I get this whole new kind of effect. And what it actually does is it goes as far as to like reactivate some of the green with this wash, and it blends it back together. So you can't do this too much. You don't want to overdo it, and it dilutes the brown, or it dilutes the green, or it gets muddy and kind of washes out the color and looks like mud. It looks like nothing. But you can get away with like putting a nice one wash on top. Let's go a bit further. Let's try it if we just did, this is our straight gold here. So what if I just did my gold, and this is of course the gold we used in the arrow. Okay, it looks pretty strong, but when we put it on top, it's actually going to be a bit of a wash. So At first glance, maybe I hold it next to my painting, maybe I like the gold a little bit more versus just going with the straight brown. On the Jerry one, it's pretty muted, but ours is a little bit bright, so maybe I want to give it the gold treatment. So if I have, you can see I have gold here, so I have gold here. I have green here, so I have green here. Like every color kind of balance itself, not just in the piece, but across the piece. So I'm gonna keep my gold, I'm gonna go for the gold, and I'm gonna turn it this way. And if it gets too crazy, I have my shader brush here. So I'm going all the way back to where my black was. And I'm just giving it a little tease on the highlight. Like so. And same thing here, a little tease on the highlight. Making sure to leave that highlighted edge. And this is the same thing with tattooing. If you can use, I wouldn't use a wash, but if you do like another color on top of a color, like if I tattooed a gold on top of a red, it's going to mix in the skin and actually give you an orange in the skin. And just like you can mix an orange with a red and a yellow in the palette, when you tattoo a gold into a red, it's going to make a little bit of an orange mix there in the skin. So don't rely on that technique if you want to make a nice vibrant orange, but it does make blending your same color family really easy, because even if you mix it first in the color palette or in your ink cap or in your machine, then once it actually interacts in the skin, it further mixes and really helps it smooth itself out. So there we have it. You can see just adding a little bit of gold on top of that green gave us this whole new kind of feeling for the painting. And it'll be different too if you use a stronger dilution of the gold, a stronger dilution of the other colors as well. So there we go. And the name of the game, of course, is to let this dry really well. And I want to give you guys a little bit of a bonus video, a little bit of a bonus kind of thing on how to actually, what you can do with this, what it means to actually do these, and a few more kind of things to preserve the painting itself.